Avery Hale had spent 3 years learning how to disappear in a crowded room, but tonight she could feel every beat of her heart. She moved between the long oak tables with a tray balanced on one hand, refilling goblets while nobles from the 5 packs talked beneath banners of silver, green, black, and crimson. The bonding hall smelled of cedar smoke, roasted meat, wet wool, and expensive wine. At the far end, the dais waited beneath the carved wolves of the royal crest. Hidden under the high collar of Avery's dark blue serving dress rested a small silver mating token. Elias Mercer had given it to her 6 nights ago behind the kitchens. "When they call my name," he had whispered, closing her fingers around it, "I will choose you." The idea had sounded impossible. Elias was heir to a respected northern alpha house. Avery was 23, without family name or property, raised in the royal keep's kitchen ward, and known to most nobles only as the waitress who remembered their wine. Still, she had believed him. She had built 6 impossible nights of hope around one promise and one small piece of silver. "Stop looking at the dais," Maeve murmured as she passed with an empty pitcher. Avery forced her gaze down. "I'm working. You have filled Lord Fenwick's cup 3 times." The old lord glanced at his overflowing goblet. Avery lowered the bottle. "My apologies, my lord." Maeve caught her sleeve behind a stone pillar. Worry sharpened her green eyes. "He can still disappoint you." Avery swallowed. "Not tonight." A staff struck the floor 3 times. The music stopped. One by one, eligible alphas climbed the dais and declared their chosen partners before the 5 packs. Avery barely heard them. Then the Master of Bonds unrolled the next parchment. Elias Mercer, heir to Red Hollow. The room seemed to narrow. Elias rose near the dais in charcoal formal leathers. He looked exactly as he had described when he told Avery how this night would happen. He climbed the steps. Avery tightened her grip on the tray. His eyes found hers. For one suspended second, she forgot to breathe. "State your choice before the 5 packs." Elias turned, not toward Avery, toward the high table. "I choose Celeste Crane." A woman in emerald silk rose beside Lord Severn Crane. Celeste was tall, black-haired, composed. Applause broke across the hall as she walked toward Elias. Avery remained still. For a heartbeat, Avery heard nothing except the thin ring left by the master's staff against stone. All week she had imagined this moment differently. Elias crossing the hall, ignoring the whispers, taking the token from her neck and fastening it openly before everyone who had ever looked through her. She had even let herself imagine Maeve crying in the kitchens afterward and pretending she had smoke in her eyes. Instead, Celeste climbed the dais to applause while Avery stood with wine on her tray and shame burning under her skin. Elias never looked at her again until the token betrayed them both. He took Celeste's hand gently, the same way he had once taken hers. Maeve appeared at the edge of Avery's vision, but Avery refused to look at her. If she did, whatever held her upright might fail. Then Celeste turned toward the servants for wine. Her gaze stopped on Avery's throat. The silver chain had slipped above her collar. That token. The applause faded. Avery looked down. Celeste stepped closer. "Where did you get it?" Every head seemed to turn. Avery's first instinct was to hide it. She refused. "It was given to me." "By whom?" Elias went pale. That was when Avery understood. Not when he chose Celeste, but when she saw fear on his face. He had never planned to choose between love and duty. He had planned to keep Avery hidden while taking everything else he wanted. Avery looked directly at him. "Elias gave it to me." A murmur rolled through the hall. Celeste turned slowly toward him. Lord Crane rose. Elias stared at Avery with naked panic. She waited. He could admit he had lied. He could lose the alliance, his father's approval, his standing. but he could tell the truth. Elias drew a breath. I never gave her anything. The hall went silent. Then he looked at the token. She stole it. Maeve made a sound behind her. Avery did not move. Lord Crane signaled toward the royal guards. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor. Gideon Rusk, Beta to the Alpha King, stopped before Avery. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in black royal leather, the iron wolf emblem of the crown fastened at his chest. Give me the token. Avery closed her hand over it. No. A few nobles laughed. Gideon lowered his voice. Do not make this harder. I did not steal it. That is for the council to decide. You already decided who to believe. His jaw tightened. The token. Avery stepped back. Gideon reached for her wrist. She twisted away. The tray fell, crashing across the stone. Wine splashed around their feet. Gideon caught Avery's forearm before she lost her balance, but she pulled hard against him. Something snagged on his gauntlet. Fabric tore. Cold air struck her left shoulder. Avery froze. The upper seam of her dress had ripped from the shoulder toward her back, exposing skin she had kept covered her entire life. Gideon released her instantly. Avery dragged the torn fabric across herself. Too late. He was staring, not at her body, at the pale mark running from her left shoulder toward her shoulder blade, a wolf's head beneath a broken crown. The color drained from Gideon's face. The room quieted one table at a time. He stepped back. Avery's anger faltered. What is it? He did not answer. His eyes lifted to hers with something she had never seen before. Recognition. Fear. Then Gideon Rusk, Beta of Greyhaven, went down on one knee before a waitress. A gasp moved through the hall. Behind Avery, the great doors opened. Rain-wet air swept into the chamber. Every wolf in the room seemed to feel the arrival at once. Avery turned. Alpha King Callum Rourke stood in the doorway, his black cloak dark with rain. His gaze moved from Gideon on one knee to Avery's torn dress to the mark on her shoulder. His face became completely still. Something ancient and violent stirred behind his eyes. And somewhere deep inside the Alpha King, a wolf that had never bowed to anyone gave a single command. Mine. For one long second, no one in the bonding hall moved. Callum Rourke stood beneath the open doors with rain silvering the shoulders of his black cloak. The hall had fallen so quiet Avery could hear water dripping from the hem onto the stone. His gaze stayed on the mark exposed above her torn dress. Then it moved to Gideon. Stand. Gideon obeyed at once, but the beta's face had not recovered its color. Callum crossed the hall without hurry. No one spoke as he passed. Avery had seen powerful men before pack lords, commanders, council elders, but this was different. Callum did not seem to demand space. The room simply gave it to him. He stopped a few feet away. His eyes dropped once to the torn fabric at Avery's shoulder, then immediately lifted back to her face. Without a word, he removed his cloak. Avery stiffened. Callum did not step closer. He held the cloak out to her. The distinction was small enough that most of the room probably missed it. Avery did not. She took it herself and wrapped it around her shoulders. Warmth and the scent of rain, cedar, and something darker closed around her. Callum's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Gideon leaned toward him. My king. Not here. It is the crownless wolf seal. A ripple moved through the nearest nobles. Callum's expression did not change, but Avery saw the exact moment the words landed. Something cold settled behind his eyes. Lord Severin Crane pushed away from the high table. This is absurd. A serving girl shows a scar and your beta kneels? Callum turned his head. That was all. Crane stopped speaking. Clear the center of the hall, Callum said. Royal guards moved immediately. Avery looked around as men in black armor began closing ranks. Her anger returned. I am not going anywhere. Callum looked at her. You are leaving this room. That sounds very much like an order. It is. She lifted her chin. Then say why. Several people nearby inhaled sharply. Callum studied her for a moment. Avery expected anger. Instead, he said, because every person in this hall now has a reason to decide what you are before you know yourself. That does not make me your prisoner. No. Then stop surrounding me with armed men. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. He looked past her. Half the guard. Back. The men nearest Avery stepped away. Gideon glanced at Callum but said nothing. Avery noticed. The Alpha King had changed an order because she challenged it. That did not make her trust him, but it made her pay attention. Maeve pushed through the servants gathered near the wall. I'm going with her. A guard blocked her. Avery's temper sharpened. She comes. Callum looked at Maeve, then at Avery. She comes. The guard moved. They were taken through a side passage away from the hall and into an old receiving chamber overlooking the rain-dark courtyard. The room contained a long table, 6 chairs, and a cold hearth. Gideon shut the door behind them. Avery remained standing. Callum did the same. No one tried to take the cloak from her. Tell me what that mark is, she said. Gideon answered first. A bloodline seal. Whose? House Valen. The name meant little to Avery, but Maeve went still. Callum watched her carefully. One of the founding houses was destroyed 23 years ago. Before its fall, House Valen had not merely governed land. Its bloodline had been named in the founding covenant as one of the few with legal succession rights if the reigning royal house violated the old compact. That was why Gideon had knelt. Not to a scar, but to what it might legally represent. Avery felt something inside her tighten. How old was the last heir? Gideon's answer came more slowly this time. An infant. How old would she be now? No one spoke. Avery looked from Gideon to Callum. 23, Callum said. The room seemed smaller. Avery was 23. She folded the cloak more tightly around herself. You think I'm her. We think the possibility has to be verified, Callum said. Verified how? The mark first, records after that. Avery's fingers moved unconsciously toward the scar beneath the cloak. And if it is real? Callum's attention sharpened. For an instant, Avery became aware of how close he was. Not close enough to touch. Close enough that her body noticed anyway. Heat moved beneath her skin. Something in Callum changed too. His breathing slowed. His hand flexed once at his side before going still. His eyes dropped briefly to her mouth. Then he stepped back, deliberately. Avery noticed that too. There was something between them she did not understand. Something instinctive and dangerous. But whatever Callum felt, he was holding it on a chain. She looked directly at him. If the mark is real, what does that make me? Gideon's gaze shifted toward the king. Callum did not look away from Avery. Potentially, he said, the one woman in this kingdom who can take my crown. By dawn, the story had already escaped the bonding hall. Avery knew it from the way servants stopped speaking when she passed, from guards stationed at every stairwell, and from the sealed messages Gideon carried in before sunrise. Somewhere below, the 5 packs were waking to the news that a waitress might carry the bloodline of a dead founding house. Avery had not slept. Maeve had dozed for perhaps an hour near the cold hearth, but Avery remained by the window, Callum's cloak around her shoulders. Beyond the glass, the royal keep looked unchanged. Her life had split open in front of half the kingdom, yet the courtyard below was already filling with kitchen carts as though nothing had happened. The door opened. Callum entered with Gideon and an older man Avery recognized immediately. Garrick Vale, royal steward. He had served the Rourke household longer than Avery had been alive, first under Callum's father and now under Callum himself. Tall, narrow-faced, silver at the temples, Garrick carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Avery had seen him dismiss guards, stewards, and minor lords with the same quiet efficiency. Men like Garrick did not need titles announced twice. His gaze settled on Avery. So this is the girl. I have a name. Garrick gave a shallow bow. Avery Hale. Callum remained near the door. Garrick managed my father's household records. If anyone knows what survived from the Valen years, it is him. The steward placed a leather folder on the table. What survived is precisely the problem, my king. Inside were copies of old territorial claims and council notices. House Valen disappeared 23 years ago. Since then, false claimants have attempted to use its name for political leverage. None possess the seal, but the timing here is unusually convenient. Avery stared at him. Convenient for whom? Anyone who wishes to destabilize the crown. Gideon's expression hardened. You saw the mark. I saw a mark, Garrick replied. The elders have not examined it. Nor has her history been verified. The girl is standing here, Avery said. Garrick continued. There is also the pendant. Avery's hand moved instantly to the silver piece beneath her dress. An heirloom strengthens the claim only if its custody can be established. It has been mine as long as I can remember. That is not the same thing. It is to me. Callum crossed the room. Show me. Avery hesitated. The strange pull she had felt between them the night before returned as he came closer, subtle but unmistakable. Callum seemed to feel it too. He stopped before entering her space and waited. Only then did Avery pull the chain free. The pendant was small, crescent-shaped, worn smooth along one edge. She finally let him examine it. Callum turned it once. Garrick said, If it is genuine, it belongs in the Crown Evidence Vault until the hearing. Avery immediately reached for it. No, Callum looked at her. That is the only thing I have from before this castle. It will be protected. By whom? The Crown. Avery gave a short, humorless laugh. The same Crown whose history I am apparently supposed to question? Gideon looked at Callum. We could leave it with her under guard. Garrick answered first. And if it disappears? If someone substitutes it before verification? Every pack lord will accuse the Crown of negligence. Avery saw the word land. Callum was no longer looking at her. He was looking at the problem around her. The 5 packs, the council, a dead house, a possible succession claim. Garrick pressed harder. Until the truth is established, she is a political variable with the potential to split the kingdom. Avery's stomach turned. A variable. Callum's attention returned to her. That is not how I see you. Then prove it. Silence stretched between them. For 1 second, Avery thought he might. Instead, Callum closed his fingers around the pendant. Until the hearing, it goes to the evidence vault. Maeve stood. Avery. No. Avery kept her eyes on Callum. Let him finish. He did. You will remain in the North Wing until verification begins. You may move within that wing, but you will not leave the castle. Any correspondence leaving the keep will be reviewed by the Royal Steward's office. Avery stared at him. You said I was not under arrest. You are not. Can I leave? No. Can I send a letter without your people reading it? Not yet. Can I keep my own property? Callum's hand tightened around the pendant. Not this. Something colder than anger settled inside her. Gideon shifted, uncomfortable. Even Garrick had gone quiet. Callum stepped closer, lowering his voice. This is temporary. Until I know what you are, I cannot risk a kingdom on trust. The words landed harder than Elias calling her a thief. Elias had been a coward. Callum was something more dangerous. a man powerful enough to make distrust into law. Avery unclasped the chain completely and placed it in his hand. Then, take it. For the first time since entering the room, Callum seemed uncertain. Avery pulled his cloak from her shoulders and folded it over the chair. Two guards took position outside the open door. Callum watched her look at them. "You are not my prisoner," he said again. Avery met his eyes. "You should stop saying things that aren't true." The verification chamber had no windows. No rain, no courtyard, no glimpse of open sky, only stone walls, a long black table, and 3 elder witnesses seated beneath the crest of the 5 packs. Callum stood at the head of the room. Gideon remained near the doors. Maeve stood a few steps behind Avery, admitted as her companion for the hearing. Garrick Vale waited beside a locked evidence case with both hands folded behind his back. Her pendant had spent the night somewhere she could not see, guarded by men she had not chosen, because Callum had decided that was safer. Now, half the council had come to watch it prove whether she was who everyone feared she might be. Lord Severin Crane sat across from her with Celeste beside him. Elias was not present. Avery was grateful for that much. The senior elder lifted his hand. "We will begin with the claimed heirloom." Garrick unlocked the case. A silver crescent lay inside. Avery stopped breathing. Something was wrong. The shape was almost perfect. The chain was the same length. Even the worn edge had been copied. But the tiny nick near the lower curve was gone. She had caught that nick against her thumb thousands of times since childhood. "That isn't mine." Every eye turned toward her. Garrick paused. "You have not touched it." "I don't need to." Callum's gaze sharpened. "Avery, the mark on the lower edge is missing." One elder picked up the pendant with gloved fingers. He pressed the concealed seam described in the Valen archive record. Nothing happened. He tried again. The silver crescent remained solid. The second elder examined it and slowly shook his head. "There is no internal mechanism." Lord Crane leaned back. "How unfortunate." Avery looked at Callum. He looked at the pendant. Crane rose. "We were told this woman carried a Valen heirloom. We now have a common silver ornament placed in royal custody under her name." "She said it was switched," Gideon said. Crane turned. "After presenting a false object?" "I presented nothing," Avery snapped. "Your king took it from me." A faint murmur ran around the table. Crane seized it instantly. Then perhaps the crown should explain how an alleged dynastic artifact became counterfeit overnight. Callum's face went still. Garrick closed the evidence case. The vault access record shows no unauthorized entry. "Who had authorized entry?" Callum asked. "My office, the evidence keeper, 2 senior household officers." "And you?" Garrick met his eyes. "As royal steward, yes." Avery no longer trusted reasonable answers. Crane folded his hands. "Until the artifact is produced, House Crane requests that the claimant's testimony be treated as unreliable." "Denied," Callum said. Crane's eyes narrowed. "The object disappeared while under Crown custody. That failure belongs to the Crown, not to Avery Hale." It did not make her feel better. A guard entered and whispered to Garrick. The steward listened, then looked toward Maeve. "We have another matter." Avery's stomach tightened. Garrick said, "Maeve Carter admits she knew of the pendant before last night. She also entered Avery's room repeatedly." Maeve stared at him. "I live beside her. You had opportunity." "She did not touch it," Avery said. Garrick signaled to the guards. Maeve stepped back. "Avery, don't." 2 guards took Maeve by the arms. Avery turned on Callum. "Stop them. We need to establish who had access." "She had access when the pendant was still real." No one answered. Avery pointed at the counterfeit crescent. "It changed after you took it from me." The words struck harder because everyone in the room knew they were true. Callum looked at Maeve, then at Garrick. Release her. My king procedure. I said release her. The guards let go. Callum removed the royal seal ring from his finger and placed it on the table. Effective immediately, Avery Hale is no longer confined to the North Wing. Her correspondence will not be reviewed. No member of her household will be questioned without Gideon or an independent council witness present. Garrick's expression tightened for the first time. Callum continued, all evidence connected to the Valen claim will be removed from sole crown custody. Crane gave a short laugh. You intend to announce that the Alpha King cannot secure his own evidence? If that is what happened, yes. The room quieted. Callum looked toward the three elders. Each item will be held by a panel representing 3 separate packs. No Rourke officer will have exclusive access. It cost him something to say it. Avery could see that in the faces around the table. A king surrendering control of royal evidence was not a small concession. Crane would use it. The council would remember it. Callum did it anyway. Instead, she felt tired. After the chamber cleared, Callum found her in the corridor. Maeve stood a few steps away, rubbing the red marks left on her arms. I was wrong, he said. Avery looked at him. No excuse followed. The pendant was safer with you. Yes, I am correcting that. You are correcting what happened after you took it. Callum absorbed the distinction. Avery glanced toward Maeve, then back at him. You fixed the cage after you put me inside it. His jaw tightened, but he did not argue. For once, the Alpha King had nothing he could order into being. Freedom inside a royal fortress was a strange thing. By evening, Avery could walk beyond the North Wing again, send letters without Garrick's office opening them, and take Maeve wherever she wished. Yet every corridor felt different now. Servants watched her with curiosity. Guards watched her with concern. Nobles watched her as though calculating what she might become. Avery preferred the servants. They had always looked at her directly. Maeve had gone to the kitchens to collect a few of Avery's belongings when Avery decided to retrieve a small sewing kit she had left in the old wardrobe room near the western service stairs. It was a familiar route, one she had crossed hundreds of times before the scar, the council, and the word claimant had changed the way people looked at her. She refused an escort. Callum had removed the confinement order. Avery intended to use the freedom he had returned. The service corridor was narrow and dim, its stone walls carrying the smell of soap, lamp oil, and old smoke. Avery passed the laundry alcove and turned toward the western stairs. A door closed behind her. She stopped. No footsteps followed. Avery looked back. The corridor was empty. She continued, slower now. At the top of the stairs, someone stepped out of the shadow. A man in a dark household coat. Avery recognized the uniform, but not the face. Lady Hale. She almost laughed at the title. I'm not a lady yet. No. His voice was wrong. Too flat. Avery stepped back. The man moved toward her. She saw his hand reach out. Not for a weapon. For hair. Avery turned and ran. He caught the back of her sleeve before she reached the landing. She slammed her elbow backward and felt it strike ribs. The man grunted but held on. Let go. He twisted her toward the stairs. That was when Avery understood. He did not need a knife. The western service stair dropped 2 floors through a narrow stone shaft. A fall would look like an accident. A frightened claimant alone after dark. One misstep. One body at the bottom. Avery drove her heel into his shin. His grip broke. She stumbled sideways, caught the wall, and turned just as he lunged again. Something hit him hard enough to lift him off his feet. Avery heard bone strike stone. Callum stood between her and the stairs. She had not seen him arrive. One moment, the attacker had been reaching for her. The next, the Alpha King had him by the throat against the wall. "Who sent you?" The man clawed at Callum's wrist. Callum's face had changed. Not transformed. Something worse. His eyes seemed almost colorless, stripped down to something cold and predatory. A low sound rolled from his chest. The attacker tried to speak. Callum tightened his grip. "Who?" He drove the man back against the stone. "Callum." No reaction. The attacker's face darkened. Avery stepped closer, despite every instinct telling her not to. "Callum." His head turned. For one terrible second, the thing looking at her did not feel entirely human. Then recognition returned. Callum released the man. He collapsed, coughing violently. Gideon came running from the far passage with 2 guards. "Take him alive," Callum said. The guards seized the attacker. Callum turned toward Avery. She stepped back. He stopped immediately. That frightened her almost as much as the attack, because he understood why. His gaze moved over her face, her arms, the torn sleeve. "Are you hurt?" "I don't know." He took half a step. Avery flinched. Callum went still. "I won't touch you." Avery pressed one hand against the wall. "You almost killed him." "Yes." "You would have." "Yes." The honesty unsettled her more than an excuse would have. 3 days ago, she had feared Callum because he could lock a door and call it protection. Now she understood there was another kind of power inside him, one that did not need doors. "If you ever decided I was really your enemy," she said quietly, "what would stop you from looking at me the way you looked at him?" Callum's face hardened, though not at her. "I would never hurt you." "You don't know that." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He did not tell her to trust him. He did not tell her she was wrong. He simply stepped farther away. Gideon knelt beside the attacker while one guard searched the man's coat. Nothing in the outer pockets. The second guard rolled him onto his side. Avery saw a flash of black thread inside the lining. Gideon saw it too. "Wait." He pulled the fabric open. Stitched beneath the inner seam was a small wolf emblem worked in black thread around a single vertical bar. Callum's expression changed. Avery had seen that mark before, not on banners. On restricted staff records, internal doors, and the uniforms of men assigned to the royal household rather than the public guard. Gideon looked up. Royal household insignia. No one spoke. The attacker was not an outsider who had slipped through the castle walls. He belonged inside them. Gideon checked the stitching again. Legitimate issue. Callum stared at the unconscious man. The implication settled over the corridor. Someone with authorized palace access had tried to kill Avery. "The household offices," Callum said. "Seal them." Gideon stood. "Everyone?" "Everyone." Avery looked at the black thread insignia in Gideon's hand. The danger was not approaching the royal keep. It had already been living inside it. And for the first time since her scar had been exposed, Callum Rourke looked less like a king protecting his fortress than a man discovering he did not know who inside it belonged to him. By morning, the royal keep had become a locked machine. Every household office was sealed. Senior staff were questioned in pairs. Access lists were copied before anyone could alter them, and Gideon personally took possession of records connected to the man who had attacked Avery on the western stairs. Avery learned this from Maeve because Callum did not come to see her. She told herself she preferred that. It was easier to think about evidence than the image of his hand around another man's throat. Near midday, Gideon appeared at the north wing with a face that told her the search had found something worse than an assassin. "The king wants you in the Black Archive." Avery folded her arms. "Is that a request?" Gideon hesitated. Then, remembering the last several days, he corrected himself. "Yes." That was enough to make her go. The black archive lay below the old council chambers, behind two iron doors Avery had never seen opened. No windows, no servants, no tapestries, pretending history was cleaner than it had been. Callum waited inside beside a stone table. A sealed leather packet rested before him. Gideon closed the door. "What is it?" Avery asked. Callum looked tired in the way men did after discovering that loyalty had been built on incomplete truths. Gideon traced the attacker's household authorization through old administrative codes. Gideon placed several copied entries beside the packet. The black thread insignia is still issued under a classification created during King Aldrich's reign. Most old categories were retired years ago. One was not. Avery looked at the heading. Directive 47. A smaller line beneath it read, Valen Continuance Protocol. Her skin went cold. Callum broke the wax seal. The parchment inside was older than she was, its edges darkened with age. His father's royal mark sat at the bottom. Callum read silently first. Avery watched a muscle move once in his jaw. What does it say? He turned the document toward her. The language was formal, almost bloodless. Any surviving member of House Valen capable of establishing succession rights was to be identified, contained, and prevented from reaching legal age with a viable crown claim. Avery read the paragraph twice. Prevented how? Gideon looked at Callum. Callum answered, It does not specify. Avery lifted her eyes. It does not need to. No. She thought of the man on the stairs and the way he had tried to push her down rather than draw a weapon. Your father knew someone survived. Yes. And he built a system to find them. Yes. Me. Grollem's Chaza held hers. If you are the Valen heir, then yes. Near the implementation section was a list of junior household officers assigned to the protocol. One set of initials stopped her. Go. The Garrick. Gideon nodded. He was a junior steward then, low enough to handle records, high enough to move them. Avery stared at the initials. The same man who had called her a possible political weapon. The same man who advised taking her pendant. The same man whose office had questioned Maeve. Does he know you found this? No, Gideon said. Callum folded the document carefully. Avery watched him. What happens now? That depends on what I do with it. She understood before he explained. If Directive 47 remained inside the Black Archive, the Crown could argue it was protected royal material. With it made public, the question became larger. The old Crown itself had created the machinery used against House Valen. Avery looked at him. If this becomes public, what does it do to you? It gives you grounds to demand a trial of reckoning. Gideon's expression tightened. If the council determines the Rourke crown deliberately attempted to extinguish a founding bloodline, succession protections can be invoked. Meaning? Callum answered quietly. They can remove me. Silence settled between them. There it was. The choice. Avery had seen him make one like it before. In the north wing, with her pendant in his hand, he had looked at a frightened kingdom and chosen control. Callum picked up Directive 47. For one moment, Avery expected him to return it to the packet. Instead, he held it out to her. She did not take it immediately. What are you doing? Giving you the document before I register it with the council. You know what this could cost you? Yes. And you are giving it to me anyway? His eyes did not leave hers. I already chose my crown over your freedom once. A beat passed. I won't make that choice twice. The words were not an apology. That mattered. An apology would have asked her to make him feel better. This asked nothing. Avery took the parchment. The old paper felt almost weightless in her hands. He did not come closer while she read. He kept the stone table between them, as though he understood that after the stairs and the north wing, even comfort offered without permission could feel like another kind of pressure. Callum turned to Gideon. Summon the independent evidence panel. Directive 47 is to be entered under the same custody rules as every Valen document from this point forward. Gideon nodded. No sole crown access. None. Avery looked down at King Aldrich's seal. Callum had just placed a weapon against his own throne into her hands. Trust did not return in a single moment. She was not ready to forgive him. But for the first time, since he had taken her pendant, Avery saw a difference between the man before her and the king whose name was written at the bottom of Directive 47. Callum could have hidden the truth. Instead, he had made certain she could use it. Avery had spent most of her life learning what powerful people failed to notice. They noticed empty glasses and late meals. They rarely noticed the woman carrying the tray or remembered that she could hear them. By the third morning after Directive 47 entered independent custody, Avery sat in the north wing with copies of household expenditures spread around her. Callum had not asked to join her. Gideon had offered no suggestions. Maeve sorted pages by year. This one says cellar repairs. Avery reached for it and stopped at a notation in the margin. Simile by. I know that code. Maeve leaned closer. C-17 isn't an accounting category. It was what old kitchen staff called a restricted wine cellar section beneath the Western Service Wing. Avery had carried trays there years ago during private dinners arranged by Garrick Vale. Servants left trays outside a secondary passage, knocked twice, and walked away. Avery searched the stack again. C-17 appeared beside expenses that had nothing to do with wine. Archive maintenance, private carriage fees, political dinners. Why would the royal steward bill political expenses through a wine cellar? An hour later, they were below the kitchens. C-17 looked ordinary dusty bottles, old racks, cold stone. Years ago, kitchen workers had complained that the far wall stayed colder than the rest. Avery counted her steps from the corridor outside, then crossed the cellar again. The measurements did not match. This room is too short. Maeve stared at her. There's space behind that wall. They moved a rack. Behind it was an old wooden panel. Avery remembered that service doors built for workers carrying crates used recessed releases. Her fingers searched until a latch shifted. The wall opened inward. Faded letters remained beyond it. CR-17 Continuity Records. Maeve exhaled. Avery understood immediately. Before the modern archive existed, wartime household records had been stored beside the logistics wing that handled kitchens, wagons, refugees, and displaced households. Avery did not open drawers at random. She checked dates. One shelf held numbered wartime volumes. Sisher E. Sisher R. Sisher San. Sisher Wu. 44 is missing. The Central Archive Index listed Volume 44 as damaged during wartime transfer. But a numbered volume disappearing outright would have left an obvious break in the series, so whoever concealed it had been safer leaving it in the old room and declaring it lost on paper. A small cross-reference read, 44 secondary intake. They searched the cabinets until Maeve found old service keys in a maintenance niche. The third opened a narrow secondary cabinet. Volume 44 lay inside. It was a royal household evacuation ledger, origins, escorts, temporary identities, placements, the kind of record created here when wartime arrivals were processed through the service wing. Avery turned to the date of the Northern Keep collapse. Then she stopped. Infant female. Origin. Northern household. The words had been corrected in darker ink. Fallen. Placement. Royal kitchen ward. Assigned identity. Avery Hale. Maeve covered her mouth. For a moment, Avery stared at her own name. 23 years of namelessness had been reduced to one administrative line. Her life had not vanished in fire. It had been filed, corrected, and hidden. Maeve reached for her hand, but Avery shook her head gently. Not yet. There was still a question the ledger could answer. Who had touched her history after she entered the keep? Avery forced herself to look at the margin. Z. V. Garrick Vale. He knew, Maeve whispered. He handled the record. Avery looked around again. If Garrick had hidden the ledger, he had used this room himself. She remembered him during private dinners, always placing keys, seals, and receipts to his left, because an old injury made his right hand stiff. Avery searched the left side of the abandoned steward's desk. Behind a shallow panel sat a lockbox. Inside was a silver crescent. Avery recognized the tiny nick instantly. My key. She pressed the internal seam. The hidden mechanism opened. The original Silver Moon key had been stolen after Callum placed it under Crown protection. Why keep it? Maeve asked. Avery looked at the ledger. And the key Garrick could have destroyed. Insurance. If Garrick kept proof that could destroy him, he expected to need leverage against the man paying him. There should be a private payment record in the same cache. They searched for financial records. Avery found a small reconciliation book disguised among seller accounts. It was Garrick's private counter record, tracking what Crane had paid, what remained owed, and what Garrick could use if Crane tried to silence him. Most entries resembled wine purchases, but Avery knew wine prices. One claimed payment for enough imported red to fill half the lower cellar. No such shipment had ever arrived. The initials beside it were S.C., large payments clustered around council discussions of Valen extinction, Northern Territorial reviews, and finally, the bonding feast. Avery compared the notation with a House Crane wine invoice she remembered processing in the kitchen office. Same account structure. S. C. Severin Crane. The newest payment was dated the day after the bonding feast. Beside it, Our 27. Avery searched Garrick's administrative slips and found a routine clearance form. Royal Household Operative RH-27. Temporary Service Corridor Access. The date was the night she had been attacked. The guard report from the western stairs had identified the attacker by the same number. Avery went still. King Aldrich had created Directive 47. Garrick had processed the surviving Valen child and hidden the ledger. After Aldrich died, Crane paid Garrick to keep House Valen extinct on paper because Crane benefited from its lands. When Callum took Avery's key, Garrick stole it. When her scar became public, Crane paid again. Garrick activated RH-27. It was never 3 different mysteries, Avery said. Maeve looked at the evidence. It was the same arrangement surviving long after the man who started it was dead. Footsteps sounded outside. Gideon appeared with 2 guards. By then, Avery had solved it. She gave him the chain from beginning to end. When she finished, Gideon remained silent. You found all of this. No, Avery said. I listened. She looked at the shelves powerful men had ignored for 23 years. People say extraordinary things around women carrying trays. Gideon touched nothing. He sealed the corridor and called the independent 3-pack evidence panel. They documented every item where Avery had found it, listed Avery and Maeve as the discoverers, sealed the original Silver Moon key, Volume 44, Garrick's counter ledger, and the RH-27 authorization, then closed C-17 under independent custody. Nothing returned to Callum. Nothing went back to the Crown Vault. Avery had found the proof herself. By sunset, everyone in Greyhaven knew about Directive 47. Not the ceremonial bells used for bonds or victories, but the short iron sequence summoning the High Council to emergency session. Directive 47 had already been entered into the council record when Callum surrendered sole Crown control of the evidence, and authorized copies had circulated among council members. One of those copies had reached Crane, and he leaked it before the bells finished ringing. Not the payment trail, not Garrick's counterledger, not RH-27, only the part that hurt Callum most. King Aldrich Rourke had ordered the surviving Valen heir contained before she could reach legal age. And when that heir finally appeared 23 years later, Aldrich's son had confined her to the North Wing and taken her only heirloom into Crown custody. The story was brutally simple because enough of it was true. Avery stood in the council antechamber while voices rose beyond the doors. Maeve remained beside her. He's using Callum's own mistake. Yes, and people will believe it. They should believe the part that happened. Callum had freed her, surrendered sole custody of evidence, and given her Directive 47 knowing what it might cost him. None of that erased the locked doors. The council doors opened. Gideon appeared. They've introduced an emergency motion. Inside, Callum stood at the head of the long table. But for the first time since Avery had met him, the room did not feel entirely his. Lord Crane held the floor. House Rourke built the machinery that erased House Valen. The present king discovered the surviving heir and immediately restricted her movement, seized her property, and placed her communications under surveillance. His gaze moved to Avery. Those are not allegations. They are facts. Callum did not deny them. Crane continued. The Crown now asks this council to believe that same claimant was later attacked by a royal household operative through a system created by the previous king. A council elder turned toward Callum. There is a lawful remedy. Gideon's expression changed. Royal security privilege, the elder said. Invoke it, and Directive 47 returns under sealed Crown jurisdiction. Royal archive material would be restricted from adversarial use until the threat to succession is resolved. Avery understood immediately. Callum could regain control of the most dangerous evidence in the case. Crane smiled faintly. Perhaps he expected Callum to do exactly that. Avery did too. She had already seen what fear of losing a kingdom could make him choose. Callum looked at her. Then he removed the royal seal from his finger and set it on the table. I will not invoke royal security privilege. Several counselors spoke at once. Callum waited until the room quieted. Effective immediately, I relinquish exclusive Crown jurisdiction over all Valen evidence and records connected to Directive 47. Gideon went still. The trial of reckoning will be chaired by an independent council panel. Until judgment, I suspend my authority over evidence, custody, archive access, and appointments connected to this case. Crane's smile disappeared. One elder leaned forward. My king, if the panel finds the Crown institutionally responsible, they may remove me. Callum looked toward the council. Avery Hale will have full access to every Rourke archive relevant to her claim. Nothing will be sealed because it embarrasses my house or endangers my position. Around the table, two elders exchanged uneasy looks. Another avoided Callum's eyes entirely. Avery understood what the gesture meant. A king could survive accusation more easily than weakness, and by surrendering jurisdiction, Callum was giving his enemies both an argument and an opening. Yet if he kept control, every piece of evidence Avery presented tomorrow could be dismissed as something the Crown had filtered first. There was no safe version of this decision for him, only a fair one for her, not another apology. He had taken the power he once used against her and placed it beyond his own reach. Crane rose. This is theater. No, Callum said. Theater would be asking everyone in this room to trust me while I control the evidence. Without royal security privilege, the tribunal would proceed under independent authority. Callum might survive it. He might not. When the chamber emptied, Avery found him alone beside the table. You could lose the crown tomorrow, she said. Yes, because you refused the one law that could protect it. Yes? Avery studied him. Part of her wanted the moment to repair everything. It did not. Trust was not restored because someone finally made the right choice. But something had changed. The first time Callum feared losing his crown, he had taken away Avery's freedom. This time, faced with the same fear, he had surrendered his own control. "If the council removes me tomorrow," he said, "I need you to know I would make the same choice again." Avery held his gaze. She did not tell him she forgave him. She did not tell him what the mate pool had become inside her. "Then tomorrow," she said, "tell them the truth." Callum nodded. Outside, the emergency bells fell silent. By morning, one of them could lose everything. The trial of reckoning filled the bonding hall before sunrise. Avery recognized the room, though it no longer felt like the place where Elias had called her a thief. The dais was gone. A tribunal table stood beneath the banners of the 5 packs. Council elders occupied the center. Representatives from 3 independent packs sat beside sealed evidence chests. Nobles crowded the galleries. Servants stood along the rear walls. Avery noticed them first. Women with pitchers, kitchen maids in plain gray wool, people who knew what it meant to be present and unseen. Callum stood to the right of the tribunal without his royal seal. Gideon stood behind him. Lord Severin Crane occupied the opposite side beside his advocate. Garrick Vale sat under guard, pale and rigid. The senior elder struck the table once. "We will hear first the identity claim of Avery Hale." Avery rose. No advocate stood with her. She had chosen that. "Present the bloodline proof." Avery turned her left shoulder toward the witnesses. 3 elders examined the crownless wolf seal against the archived Valen description. "The mark is authentic," the eldest said. "It establishes Valen bloodline." Crane's advocate rose. "Bloodline does not establish identity." "I know," Avery said. "Open the second seal." An independent panel member broke the wax on a narrow evidence box and removed a silver crescent. The original silver moon key lay under the tribunal lamps, the tiny nick near its lower edge exactly where Avery remembered it. 3 witnesses inspected the internal mechanism, engraved Valen sequence and craftsmanship marks. "The artifact is genuine. This is the Valen heir key." Crane's advocate tried again. "Possession of an heirloom. Does not prove I was the lost child," Avery finished. "That is why there is a third proof." Volume 44 was placed on the table. Avery opened it herself. 23 years ago, a female infant was transferred after the fall of House Valen. She pointed to the corrected origin field. Valen, then the placement. Royal Kitchen Ward, finally the assigned identity. Avery Hale. Silence spread through the hall. The senior elder looked across the 3 proofs. Bloodline seal. Heir key. Original evacuation record. The identity claim is complete. Before the 5 packs, Avery Hale became the surviving heir of House Valen. Crane stood. "Then the question is whether House Rourke deliberately destroyed that house and concealed its heir." Avery faced him. "No. The question is who did what, when, and who benefited." Directive 47 was brought forward. King Aldrich created a system to identify, contain, and prevent a Valen heir from reaching legal age with a crown claim. That is the first truth. Then came Garrick's initials in the implementation record. Then the counter ledger from C-17. Avery showed the payments disguised as seller expenditures and the house Crane account pattern she had recognized from years of processing wine invoices. The payments continued after King Aldrich died. While House Crane controlled former Valen territory, she turned a page. "This payment was made the day after my seal became public." Crane's advocate rose. "Accounting patterns are not in order to kill." "No," Avery said. "So follow the timeline." She produced the Royal Household Clearance. RH 27. temporary service corridor access, authorized on the night of the attack. Gideon submitted the guard report identifying Avery's attacker as RH-27. The black thread royal household insignia recovered from his coat was entered beside it. No paper said, "Kill Avery." It did not need to. Aldrich had built the machinery. Garrick had preserved access to it. Crane paid to keep House Valen extinct on paper. When Avery's scar became public, Crane paid again. Garrick activated RH-27. Crane's advocate turned toward Callum. The current Alpha King also confined the claimant and seized her heirloom. Does he deny that? Callum stepped forward. No. The hall shifted. Garrick advised confinement. Pause. I ordered it. No excuse followed. I restricted Avery's movement, screened her correspondence, and placed the Silver Moon key in Crown custody. That decision allowed the original artifact to be stolen. Then the Rourke crown remains responsible, the advocate said. For my decision, Callum answered, yes. Avery watched him accept the part that belonged to him. The council withdrew briefly. When the elders returned, the senior member faced Avery. As recognized heir of House Valen, you may invoke removal of the reigning monarch under the trial of reckoning. The hall went still. Avery looked at Callum. Days ago, she had been a waitress waiting for Elias Mercer to choose her. Now a kingdom waited for her to choose what happened to its king. I will not remove Alpha King Callum Rourke. Crane exhaled sharply. Avery continued. The evidence does not show Callum knew of Directive 47. It shows that when he found it, he entered it into independent evidence. When his own actions compromised my claim, he surrendered crown custody. When royal security privilege could have protected his throne, he refused it. She turned toward Crane. But House Valen will be restored. Its ancestral territories will be returned. Lord Severin Crane will lose his council seat pending prosecution. Garrick Vale will stand trial for evidence theft, unlawful concealment, and using a royal household operative against me. Then Avery faced the council. And this cannot end with 2 men punished while the system remains unchanged. She demanded independent oversight of the royal archive. Claimant evidence could never again remain under sole crown custody. No uncharged civilian could be confined solely because their existence created political risk. The last provision landed hardest. Callum knew why. So did Avery. The senior elder asked, "Is that your judgment?" Avery looked toward the servants at the back of the hall, then at the king who had once locked her behind guarded doors and later surrendered his own power rather than repeat the choice. Yes. The elder struck the table. So entered. The sound echoed through the same hall where Avery had once stood with wine at her feet and a torn dress at her shoulder. Then she had been called a thief. Now the 5 packs stood as House Valen was restored in her name. The kingdom did not change in a day. Lord Severin Crane lost his council seat before sunset, but restoring House Valen took weeks of signatures, boundary reviews, and arguments over lands managed by other families for more than 2 decades. Garrick Vale was moved from the royal keep to a guarded council holding house while formal charges were prepared. The independent evidence panel returned the Silver Moon key to Avery only after every seal and record had been entered into the tribunal archive. When the silver crescent touched her palm again, Avery closed her fingers around it. This time, no king held it for her. No council decided whether she deserved it. It was hers. So was the name, Avery of House Valen. The title sounded strange for several days. Maeve enjoyed it far more than Avery did. "Lady Valen," she said one morning while arranging correspondence across Avery's desk. "Stop, my lady. Meva, founding heir of the Northern Territories." Avery threw a folded ribbon at her. For the first time in weeks, they both laughed. 3 days later, Elias Mercer requested an audience. Avery nearly refused. Then she realized there was one thing she wanted from him: an ending. He waited in a small receiving room without his bonding feast finery. He looked younger somehow, stripped of the confidence Avery had once mistaken for courage. When she entered, he stood. "Lady Avery." She stopped. "You knew my name before I had a title." Elias lowered his eyes. "I deserve that. Yes, I did love you." Avery felt no sharp pain this time, only distance. "I was afraid." My father had already promised Red Hollow's support to Crane. If I had chosen you, I would have lost everything. You didn't lose me when you chose Celeste. His gaze lifted. You lost me when you made me a liar so you could remain a coward. Elias flinched. Avery left him there. By early summer, she began traveling north to oversee the first restoration work on Valen land. She did not rebuild the old keep exactly as it had been. Too much of the past had been built for people who thought servants should remain invisible and power should remain unquestioned. She wanted something different. Callum never tried to decide what that difference should be. He sent engineers when she requested them, soldiers only when the council approved them, and no personal letters that demanded an answer. Weeks passed before Avery returned to Greyhaven for the Founders' celebration. The bonding hall had been transformed again. Music filled the space. The banners of all 6 recognized houses hung above the tables, including a new Valen standard behind the place reserved for Avery. The last time she had crossed that floor, she had carried wine. Tonight, the silver moon key rested openly at her throat. Callum stood across the hall in black formal leathers, without a crown. Their eyes met. The pull between them was immediate, stronger now that law and fear no longer stood between them. Callum did not move. He waited. Avery understood the choice he was giving her. So she crossed the hall. Not because a king had summoned her, because she wanted to. When she stopped before him, Callum's expression softened. "You came back." "I said I would." His gaze dropped briefly to the silver moon key. "It belongs there. It belongs wherever I decide it belongs." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Yes." For several seconds, neither spoke. Around them, the celebration continued, but Avery heard only the quiet steadiness of his breathing and the familiar pull that had first frightened her. "You spent months refusing to make my choices for me," she said. "I intend to continue." "Good." Callum held her gaze. "Are you sure?" Avery smiled. "You finally learned to ask. I had an excellent teacher." This time, Avery closed the distance. She kissed him first. Callum did not touch her until she lifted his hand and placed it at her waist. Only then did the control he had held for months loosen. The wolf inside him stirred, fierce and certain, but no command came with it. No claim. Not possession. Only recognition. Later, beneath the open windows of the hall where rain had once blown across the floor, Avery accepted the mate bond because she chose it. Not because she had nowhere else to go. Not because she needed a king. She had her name, her land, her proof, and a future she could build without asking anyone's permission. Callum had once been the man powerful enough to cage her. He had become the man willing to surrender power rather than do it again. And Avery, who had begun this story waiting for someone else to choose her, finally understood the difference. She chose him.